The reading today is from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. As for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. May these words be to us our light and our life. Thanks be to God. I'd like to talk today about rain. I love rain. But I have come to realize that it's best if there's some form of effective barrier between me and rain, like a roof. I've just found through painful personal experience that if you try to share interior space with rain, it does not end well. Unfortunately, that's the position we find ourselves in here at Macalester Plymouth. Our roof is not working and rain is entering the church. I know that we pride ourselves on being an open and affirming congregation. We try to be welcoming to all, but we need to draw the line at rain. There have been some interesting consequences of our leaky roof. If you enter the sanctuary from the back, I sit on the left side towards the back. That's my area. And once you have an area where you sit in church, you tend to gravitate there week after week. It would be possible for me to sit somewhere else, I suppose, but I'm sure that questions would be asked. And for the longest time, on the left-hand side in the front, there was a spot where the water damage had caused a piece of paint, probably about half the size of my palm, to break free from the ceiling and dangle by a fiber, slowly twisting in the breeze created by the ceiling fan. It was mesmerizing. I became obsessed with the dangling paint chip, and it was up there for months. After a couple of weeks, I started worrying, what if that thing falls during a service? It's going to hit someone. And then I became convinced it was going to hit Ernie Cutting. Not because I think Ernie deserves to be hit by a paint chip, but just because Ernie sits on the left-hand side in the front. That's Ernie's area, right in what I consider to be the potentially lethal falling paint chip zone. I became so concerned that one Sunday I was sitting in my area, left-hand side on the back, when I see Ernie walking into the sanctuary, and I wanted to whisper to him, "Ernie, sit on the right side today. Save yourself." I ended up not saying anything. I was afraid that Ernie would think it was really weird if I was to try to tell him where to sit. And then if Ernie did sit on the right side and someone sat where Ernie normally sits on the left side and they got hit by the paint chip, I'd feel awful. So basically, regardless of the outcome, it was somehow all going to reflect poorly on me, and that's what really matters. I don't know what happened to the paint chip. I wasn't here when it fell. I don't know if it hit someone. I don't really know the ending of the dangling paint chip story. But here's what I do know. We cannot go on like this. We can't have church members and guests living under the threat of another potential paint chip of Damocles. We can't have people who normally sit on the left side of the church randomly moving to the right side of the church willy-nilly. That would be madness. Thankfully, we know what to do. I don't know what to do, but people who possess mechanical aptitude know how to repair our roof. They know how to adjust our gutters. They know how to redo the tuck pointing so that rain stays outside the building the way that God intended. As with most remodeling projects, one thing leads to another. Once you fix the roof, then it only makes sense to deal with all the deferred maintenance items, things we've been putting off largely because our roof was leaking. And if we're going to deal with things we've been putting off for a while, it also probably makes sense to take a run at trying to reduce our outstanding mortgage debt that's been hanging over our heads like a giant paint chip. And then finally, as we're doing all this work, we should take extra steps where we can to try to make the church more welcoming, more energy efficient, more in line with the values of the congregation. Well, it turns out all these things cost money. More money than we can generate out of our annual budget, which is funded primarily by our annual stewardship campaign. So this year, in addition to having the annual stewardship campaign, we're also going to have a capital campaign. Two campaigns are going to run together. Hopefully you've heard of the capital campaign. It has a catchy slogan, brick by brick, building to serve. For the capital campaign, we're hoping to raise between $750,000 and $1 million. That is a lot of money. Or as they say in the Bible, an ark load of money. I'm pretty sure it says that in there. Whenever you reach a point like this, and clearly this is a critical juncture in the life of our church, when you reach a point like this, there are going to be questions and concerns, and I'll try to answer a few of those today. One question I've heard is, can't we just ignore the debt? Can't we do all the other work that needs to be done and just forget about the debt? Well, I'm sorry, but personally, I may be genetically incapable of comprehending that sentiment. I was raised by children of the Depression to have a solemn respect for and borderline fear of debt. So much so that I never knew debt until I got married. When my wife and I were first married, the only things we had in abundance were love and debt. We had student loans and a mortgage loan. I became very, very familiar with debt, and I have to tell you, I am not a fan. I've come to view debt as one of those necessary evils in life, very much like colonoscopies. When you got to do it, you got to do it, but you don't want to sign up for more than you really need, and you don't want it to last any longer than it absolutely has to. So I am completely on board with debt reduction being an important part of the capital campaign, partly because of my personal history, but mostly because I know that whatever we can do to reduce the debt and thereby reduce the amount of money we pay year after year after year to service that debt, those are funds we can better use to do work in the church. Another comment I've heard is, if this congregation is really capable of pulling together those kind of financial resources, shouldn't we allocate a portion to the broader community? Now that sentiment, I completely understand. I get that. I do, however, have a slightly different perspective. I think as a congregation, we can sometimes have a tendency to underestimate or perhaps undervalue the impact on the broader community of things that occur inside this church. You can come to the church anytime, and there are lots of things going on. There's a daycare center here, Boy Scout meetings, people doing yoga, small groups who meet to support each other as they work to overcome addiction issues. There's a whole other congregation called Shift that uses this building. I think these are all excellent uses of this resource with which we've been entrusted. Obviously, there are activities in the church that benefit members as well. You can see it most clearly probably with the children and the youth, because you get to see the children's sermon, and you get to hear the youth when they do their faith statements at confirmation time. So you get some kind of insight into the impact the activities they're doing here are having on their young lives. But obviously there are things that happen here that are important to adults as well, opportunities for worship, fellowship, education, counseling. So there are lots of good things that are happening here for both members and non-members alike. But I haven't even gotten to the best part. The best part is what I like to think of as a multiplier effect. Everyone who's doing something, some activity in this church, is taking a piece of that with them out into the world. And I like to imagine that whatever they've gained, whatever compassion or hope or joy, they're reflecting that out into the broader community, the people they're interacting with. And that's where real power lies. That's where good happens, one person at a time, one small act at a time. I know that it takes a leap of the imagination and a leap of faith to see how repairing a roof can lead to the betterment of humanity, but I really think that that's the case, and that's one reason I'm supporting the capital campaign. When you memorize a speech and then you get up here in front of people and realize you don't have a very good memory, that's kind of a problem. Relative to the capital campaign, what I like to do at this point is to ask you to prayerfully consider making pledges to both the stewardship campaign and the capital campaign, which begs the question, how do you prayerfully consider something? I think it's very individualized. I can't tell you exactly what to do, but I can give you an example from my own experience. When I was asked to be on the capital campaign committee, and I attended my first meeting, and I learned about the size and the scope of what needed to be done, I was initially dismayed and overwhelmed. It just seemed like such a gigantic task, and I was very worried about our church's ability to rise to this challenge and about my own household's ability to be able to make a contribution that would be significant enough to even make a tiny little dent in such a gigantic goal. What helped me was to think back on a time a few years ago when I was very troubled, and troubled being a relative term. I have an extremely easy life, but even in an easy life, events can converge that cause you to fret and worry. In my case, it was a little over 3 years ago. My father's life was coming to an end, and at the same time that was going on, my wife and I were involved in a remodeling project that appeared to have no end. And on top of that, there were some issues going on at work that were just wildly complex and very challenging. So I had a lot of things weighing on my mind, and one day I ended up taking a kayak out on a small lake that's near our home. It was just me, I was all by myself, nobody else was around. And I'm paddling and thinking, going through all these issues that were weighing me down, getting more and more anxious, more and more worried, and finally I just stopped. I stopped paddling, I stopped thinking about all my troubles, and I just drifted there. And I ended up watching a heron who was fishing along the lakeshore. And I thought, well, here we are, me and this heron, two creatures just trying to make our way in the world. The heron did not strike me as being particularly angst-ridden. He was just doing his thing, looking for fish. He seemed like he was just taking life as it comes. And that's when I thought, I need to be the heron. I need to focus on now. I can't be worrying about every possible permutation of what might happen and how I should respond. I just need to focus on what I can work on now. And that was very helpful to me at that time. It was helpful to me more recently to reflect back on that when I was getting all worked up about the capital campaign. So instead of just worrying, I could think through what our household could do. I could talk with my wife about it. My wife and I could talk with our trusty accountant, and I could pray for the wisdom to make good decisions. So that was my process. I can't tell you what your process is going to be. It may or may not involve drifting in a kayak. Maybe it's a walk in the park. Maybe it's quiet contemplation in a coffee shop. Maybe it's prayers before bedtime. I'll leave that up to you, but I can offer you these pieces of encouragement. We have members of our congregation, including members of our church's leadership team, who are so convinced that this is the right thing to do and the right direction to go, and we need to do it now, that they've already said, sign me up. They've already made pledges to the tune of slightly over $638,000. So as you're doing your prayerful consideration, please know you are not in this alone. There are already people who've stepped up and said, we need to do this, and it's really going to happen. So you can build your thought process around that. The other piece of encouragement I can offer you is chocolate. Downstairs in the social hall, there are little bricks of chocolate. Get it? Brick by brick, it all fits together. Little bricks of chocolate with little reminders on them about the capital campaign. So after the service today, please go down to the social hall. There are packets of information available for everyone about the capital campaign and the stewardship campaign. Pick up your packet, have some chocolate, do some prayerful consideration, and then in 2 weeks we'll have Commitment Sunday when we'll all gather as a congregation, we'll submit our pledges, and hopefully we'll have the resources we need to do the work that needs to be done. Thank you.